Hello, in this part I want to add some random rotation and scale on the planks I have here. So I want to build a small system and also show you how to create and expose the different values for that. So let's implement that here in our system. And the way we're going to do that is by saying on the points of the line what certain scale it should have. So let's start with the scaling value. So here I'm going to make some room. So these are my different planks. So let's create that on the side here. And here now let's talk about adding a scale value. So what we're going to do is we have multiple points, and on each point I would like to assign a scale value. So it can be 1, it can be 0.9, 0.8, or a random value. One way to do that is by using a attribute randomizer. So if you type in random, we will have attribute randomizer. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to use a value called scale. So Houdini by default will recognize the scale value here. And scale by default is also a three-dimensional vector. So we have like an x, y, and z. So now currently our values go from 0 to 1. So of course, we probably don't want to go from 0 to 1, but let's already look at the results. So here, when we copy a box or the plank on the point, it will also look at the scale each point holds. So in the geometry spreadsheet, if you go a bit more technical, we can actually see this value. So 0.0 has this value, 0.1 has this value, 0.2 has this value, and so on. So each box that gets copied on number 3 will be scaled in that value. So that's sort of what's going on. So now for tweaking these values, we want to make sure that they are not too small. So let's bring everything to maybe a 0.8. Like so, and I think that would be better. So it's like less random in shape. We can also go into options and have a random seed here, so we can play around with that. So these are quite interesting values to play around with. So we have now that random scaling. So for now exposing the values, we're going to go back to our asset properties. We're going to make sure to select our tool here, Procedural Fence, and we can expose a lot of different values. So we can expose here the min and maximum values, so we can grab these. And we can also here have the max values. So now we have the min and the max of the scales. So min, scale, and also then here max scale. Now press apply. And what we can already see is that there are actually 4 of them. So all 4 values are linked. So if I go back to my tool, we also see we have the x, y, z, and the 4th value. So this value is actually not really doing anything. So if I would fill in something here, it doesn't matter. If I would change here this value, it of course immediately will work. So we want to get rid of that value since it doesn't make sense in my system now. So we can always go here and look at our type. So it's set to a float, which is a vector 4. So it has 4 floats. So this needs to be changed to a vector 3, of course. Now, if you're in a situation where you need to reset a lot of parameters types, you can select multiple. So we have 2 selected, and we can change here this to vector 3 and click apply. And now both of them are immediately set to vector 3. So now I have this where I can individually have control over that scale. Now we could also go in here and change, for example, the seed. So we can play around with the seed value. So we can bring it here. We can also change where we want to place this as well, but I'm going to just keep it at the bottom. Just call this blank seed. And press apply. And now we have that here as well. Now, let's also talk about then adding random rotations. So implementing the scale, as you can see, was done pretty quickly, but I also want to have some random rotations. So let's, for example, take the crook plank here, and I want to make sure that each copy is not like having the same angle and detail at the same angle. So I'm going to use a very similar technique where I'm going to use an attribute randomizer. And in here, I want to choose the normal direction. The normal, if I would type in N, which stands for normal, so Houdini automatically recognizes N, it will automatically then catch up a certain direction. So here, if I plug this in over here and show my result, we can see that based on this note here, we have now some random blanks going on. So we can see that we have created these little normals here on our line. So of course we want to control this a bit better. So let's take a look here at what we could do. So first of all, I don't want them to be super random. So we're going to change here the distribution method to, for example, 2 values. So it can either be value A or B. So we have that we can use. So let's set everything to 0. So the planks should all be like we should expect them. So if I, for example, fill in a value 1 in here, we now have rotated these into another direction, into the X direction. So if I, for example, now fill in value 1 here in the Z, or maybe -1, we now have rotated them in a different direction. So maybe just keep this to 1 as well. So we can see that we can now maybe have some of that randomness in there. So if we can also go back to our seat here. So not all the planks are now rotated in that same way. So that's the first step. Maybe also give this a proper naming. So we can give this scale, and we can give this random rotation. And what we could do is we could actually keep stacking, for example, the random nodes. So if I plug this in over here, we can, for example, put in the value normal again, the N. And now we can choose the operation type. So we can, for example, add, multiply, and so on. So let's say I want to add to this value. Plug this in over here. We now have again some very random rotation. So we could play around here again with these values. We could also play around here with the global scale. So as you can see, this will also influence some of that rotation. So what I recommend with is starting again, filling in 0 in everything, and then slowly filling in the value that you want. So maybe we have some random rotation in that direction. Maybe it can be smaller. So let's say 0.5. It's a bit smaller. Let's see, what if I fill a value in here? It will automatically rotate in that direction, which might be less interesting, but maybe very subtle could work. So something that's very subtle, but in this case, I'm probably going to keep it to 0. And let's fill in the value 1 here. And we then also have some rotation there. So maybe we can keep in some low values. So we have some random rotation there. So you can see, so this can make it a bit more interesting overall. And maybe here, put in like a very small value, so they are not perfectly in that direction as well. And we're gonna do now the same again, where we can basically go here to our properties, and we can expose the values. So we can expose whatever you want, and I'm not sure if I actually want to have access to this. Maybe here, grab the global scale. So maybe you can use this for like the intensity, like random rotation amount, maybe something like so. So let's press accept. What we can also do is we can actually here if we go to our scale, we can copy here our seed value. So we can copy paste this into, for example, here, one of the random rotations as well. So now let's go back to our menu. So the seed value will also now control the scale and also the rotation. And the random rotation should now, as you could see, we could make this none, or we could have some small rotations there. So we can have some subtle rotations if we want to. So again, I can switch to different planks here, and we can have some nice variation here. And that was it for this video. So we add some random rotation and scale to our menu so we could control that in our fence tool. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video.